Mic check 1 2, mic check 1 2. This is a test of the non-emergency broadcast system. Developers, what's up? TGIF, can you hear me? Can you see me? Say something in the comments. I'll check in just a sec. Last week, or was it earlier this week, we had a pretty funny incident where I was just running on for 20 minutes. Let's see if you can hear me. Anybody? Oh, this is a push notification from my newest browser, Brave. Yeah, I did a review on Brave browser the other day. Loving this browser so far. My one complaint though is that I seem to have a problem live streaming with Brave, so I'm live streaming on Chrome, but most of this live stream is going to be on Brave, so yes. But anyway, that was a push notification I talked about in the live stream. Can you hear me? All sounds good. Thanks, Sarah. Appreciate it. Vlaslo, what's up? I haven't seen you in a while either. How's it going? Vlaslo checking in. Chiquito, hi. Sarah's here, and Paradoodly-Doo, two of our amazing moderators, both here and on the Discord. Thank you for showing up today and taking care of business in the live stream. I am drinking today a Kavita Sparkling Probiotic, Lemon Cayenne. This is courtesy of our friend Chiquito. My friend Chiquito, and yours too. He loves the developer community, and he does a lot of great stuff supporting the RealToughCandy community. So cheers, Chiquito. Thank you for the drink. I'm very excited to share today's live stream with you. It's going to be more of a workshop. I will be going to some of your questions. If you absolutely need me to see your questions, send me a super chat, because usually the chat is just so chaotic with great comments and questions that I can't get to them all. If you need me to see it, send a super chat. Or your alternative option is that today, the things we talk about today in this workshop, getting your first job as a developer, most of what we talk about can be found in my book and in my course, How to Get a Job in Web Development. This was the first book I ever published. Wall-to-wall favorite 5-star reviews over on Amazon. This is my author page. As you can see here, people really like it. And it's helped a lot of people get their first and even second and sometimes even third developer job. Paperback, Kindle, and it's also a video course on RealToughCandy.io. You'll learn everything you need to know to get that first developer job. Don't waste your time with like whiteboard interview questions. I explain why in the book, but everything that you need to know to succeed in going into 2021. So just to throw that out there, Paradoodly-Doo, I think you have those links if you're interested in those items. Also, this week, really exciting, I dropped my 5th book called Portfolio Surgery. What do you know? This is also a course on RealToughCandy.io. And if you're struggling with your portfolio, and that is something we're going to be talking about today in this workshop, we're going to be going into it. If you're having trouble with projects and making them your own and making them not boring and feeling good, if you want to feel good about your projects and you're not feeling good about them right now, this is an excellent resource for that. Again, it is a book, paperback and Kindle, just dropped off on Amazon this week. And it's also a video course on RealToughCandy.io, so check those out too. All right, so you may have seen this little screen right here, Indeed.com. This is a huge job board for developers and non-developers alike. And we're going to be talking about this today as well. But let me give you right now the rundown of what we're going to talk about today. Because we're going to have a good time. We're going to have some fun here. But we're also going to get down to business because there's so much to talk about. First main thing we're going to talk about, the first thing to ease us in to getting a job is mindset and strategy. And those things kind of bounce off each other, and they're interwoven and they feed off each other. We're going to talk about that first off. Then we're going to dive into some more technical things. We're going to talk about the 4 components that should be going into your application materials when you're applying to jobs. And then we're going to wrap it up by talking about some interview strategies and interview mindset, and a big theme with this live stream and with my live stream on freelancing as well. It always starts with a mindset, getting yourself prepared in the mind to process all this technical stuff and preparing yourself in the mind so you can go out physically and get this job. You can go out physically and start coding these things. You can go out physically and start solving problems. It starts here and then it manifests through everything else. So that's going to be our number one focus today. All right. So let me just make sure everyone, we are good to go here. What's up, newcomers? Chiquito said he can't hear or see anything. Chiquito, you got to open your eyes. Are your eyes open? I would be completely devastated if this was, you couldn't hear me or see me. Can someone please confirm you guys can see me and hear me? Because that would be really freaking embarrassing. Well, we're going to go with it. Chiquito, I hope you can hear me and see me. I hope you're just messing with me. Okay, let's get into this. So, as you can see here, I have a pretty popular, if you want to call it job board, I guess, interactive job posting site where you can look for jobs. You can even apply to jobs right on here. Pretty nifty site. There are many more like this, but this is one of the more popular ones. This is Indeed.com. As you see here, I've typed in JavaScript with a location of Des Moines. Now, what kind of seems a little weird about this combination here? JavaScript, Des Moines, Iowa. Des Moines, Iowa isn't really a place on most people's radars, right? You're thinking about JavaScript. JavaScript happens on the coasts. JavaScript happens in Silicon Valley. Those are where the jobs are, right? Yes and no. The majority of tech jobs are actually outside of Silicon Valley. That is the capital of tech, just like Hollywood is the capital of the motion picture industry. They're symbolic capitals. But the reality is jobs are everywhere. And this live stream is going to cater to people who are having some frustrations and problems landing jobs, because I think a lot of people from my own network and from what I've heard just anecdotally in other platforms and in other places, that it's not that people can't find jobs, it's that people aren't getting hired for jobs. There's a big difference. It's that people are seeing jobs. These jobs are everywhere, right? But they're not getting that callback. They're not getting that interview. Why is that? Well, number one, and this is a mindset thing too, you have to shift your mind from just focusing on Silicon Valley and these huge world-renowned cities and expand it to other places. Now, I'm not necessarily saying you have to go to Des Moines, Iowa. But this is where the mindset and the strategy comes in, because you need to start asking yourself some questions to get yourself to better understand yourself. You know, question number one you could ask, how fast do you need a job? Can you land a junior developer job in Silicon Valley? Yeah, they're there. They're out there. But how fast do you want that job? You might be applying 6-7 times to the same company before they even pay attention to you, because it's so competitive. Everyone wants to work there. If you're an aspiring actor and you want to go to Hollywood, you're not the first person to think that and do that. There are millions of other people doing just that. And that's the same with these big tech companies that are located in Silicon Valley. Not just Google, but Google adjacent companies. So, you know, it's perfectly valid if you want to work there. A lot of people do, and you know, there are some really interesting, compelling jobs out there, no doubt, but we have an entire world full of jobs, full of dev jobs. How fast do you need that dev job? Because again, if you're just applying to one city, you might be waiting quite a while. Meanwhile, and this is where Des Moines, Iowa comes in, and you can, you know, insert any city no one cares about here. Insert any city you never hear about in the news here, unless it's something like, you know, Jeffrey Dahmer or whatever. Like, no one cares about a lot of these cities, but these cities need you. All right? So I typed in JavaScript. There's 141 listings that just popped up. And that's something you should start asking yourself. How flexible am I? Now, some people aren't in a position to leave their city, and I totally get that. But if you are flexible, this may be a perfect opportunity to start a new career. And I understand this strategy isn't for everyone, but you might be waiting a while to get a call back from someone in Silicon Valley, because everyone's trying to work there. It's Hollywood for developers. And what people don't realize sometimes is that every city has a theater department Every city has these groups and people who are enthusiastic about movies and filmmaking. You don't have to go to Hollywood, to LA to make it big. You can do it right in your own town or in a city adjacent to you. So spreading your mind out to further locales, to these geographical locations that aren't on everyone's radar is a big thing that can really hasten and speed up that process of getting a job. The other thing you should ask yourself getting into this mindset of an employed developer, okay, I want a job. What comes after that? What kind of company do you want to work for? Because let's say you are open to relocating to Des Moines, Iowa. Is this realistically a place that has companies that you would like working at? Now, for me, I haven't worked in tech prior to being a software developer. So I'm kind of an outsider in that way. Like I didn't spend like my teenage years like hacking into computers and like coding all this stuff. I didn't do any of that stuff. I love the internet, but it was mostly as, a bored teenager talking with people and chatting and stuff. I wasn't like building custom apps and all that. So for me, coming in, I was like, I'll work anywhere. I don't care. I'm desperate. I will take any job. And it's like, whoa. I had to step back and say, yeah, I don't have to be desperate because there are companies everywhere and I don't have to work for a certain company. If there's a certain thing that you don't like about a company, the way they, their mission, if something about their mission statement doesn't resonate with you, you don't feel obligated to apply there. There are many other jobs. So what I'm saying is ask yourself, what kind of company do you want to work in? You have your choice. This isn't the type of industry where like, well, I guess you're stuck working for Yahoo. Like there are so many different contexts. And the software industry, this is what's really interesting about this industry, is that it's implanted in other industries. For example, healthcare. Now, healthcare deals with issues dealing with health, right? But software has a place there. They have so much going on, even in AI stuff. I know one of our longtime subscribers, Dr. Candice, I don't know if she's here, but shout out to Dr. Candice. She's doing work with healthcare and AI stuff. A lot of interesting things going on in that area, but everything. I mean, agriculture, the John Deere tractors run on incredibly advanced software. What else? Throw the industry in, and there's a software component there. So the software industry exists on its own, but it's also embedded in these different industries. And so that could be a place for you to jump off and say, I really enjoy model trains. I wonder if there's a place for me to be a developer for a model train museum or something. I don't know. That might be a little too niche. I don't know if you get paid for that. But it's something worth researching and getting in that mindset of a web developer doing something that you enjoy. Again, this isn't like other career fields where you have to be stuck. A lot of people jump from web development job to web development job every year. When they leave, that's their raise. They don't stay at one place and ask for a raise. They go to another company and get a $50,000 raise. It's just an increase in salary. But that is, effectively their raise. We don't... And this is a trend outside software too, but especially in this industry, it's not, people are surprised if you stay more than 1 or 2 years, especially in Silicon Valley. So yeah, and in company cultures too, you want to make sure that you can at least, here's what I'm saying. You don't want to work at a company you don't like, because that's the worst thing that can happen, is that you absolutely hate it and you can't stand it and getting stuck there, and worse, either leaving after 3 months, quitting and having to do the whole process over again, which is going to be really hard because you're still a newbie, and having to explain to a new employer why you left after 3 months or 2 months on the job, or getting let go because you weren't a good culture fit. And we can talk about that culture fit code word for hours. But what I'm saying is you have to ask yourself these questions, and you have to be honest about it. And if you truly will take any job thrown at you, that's okay. But a lot of that comes from people being desperate in other career fields, or, they're in an emotional state at that time where it's like, okay, I'll take anything. Slow down and ask and collect yourself and remind yourself that you have options in this career field. And then the third question I want you to ask yourself to get into this mindset to help develop your strategy. So these questions, people are wondering, okay, get into the meat of it. You have to ask yourself these questions in order to develop a strategy. What I see a lot, so I do one-on-one consulting. And a lot of my consults, I see people who are applying to a lot of jobs, just like robo applying, and they're not seeing any results and they don't know what's going on. Most of the time it's because they don't have a strategy and they haven't asked themselves some of these questions. And so this is where it starts. You have to have a good strategy or you're just going to be another resume in the heap. You're just going to be another GitHub account in the heap. We don't want you to be in the heap. We want you to be up top. We want employers and employers' agents to see your materials and have their eyes, have their pupils widen just a little bit and say, oh, interesting. Let's call them in for an interview. We want more employers to say that about you. And so developing a strategy is a really great, efficient way of having that happen. So question number 3 to ask yourself, what type of developer are you, or what type of developer do you want to be? Again, we have amazing flexibility in this career field. You could be a front-end developer where you're dealing more with user experience. A lot of times user experience comes into that. You're dealing with front-end JavaScript, front-end frameworks like React, Angular, Svelte, Vue, etc. You're working with HTML and CSS. You're working with the visual components and what people experience. So a lot of times you're doing design work. Do you want to be a back-end developer? Do you want to work with the code that communicates with the database? Do you want to be in charge of the database? Do you want to be the person who's kind of behind the scenes, working with languages like PHP or Go or Ruby? Lots of fun back-end languages there too. Or do you want to be a full-stack developer where you do it all? You have your choice, and all 3 of those types of developers are in serious demand right now. Some, no doubt. Now let's clear something up though, going into 2021. No doubt 2020 has been a hard year for just about everyone. And some companies have halted their hiring activities. Other companies have not. And in fact, other companies have sprung up during 2020 and are looking for software developers. And what we're seeing is we already have had this shift happening for 2 decades, more and more online, going more and more online, these things transforming into web apps. But now we have people of just millions of more transactions of people ordering online, of buying things, trying to stay remote and trying to stay as far away from physical locations as possible. So, more people have gotten a business that way and are doing business. They need developers. So it really there are no doubt industries that are kind of feeling the hurt right now, but a lot of the traffic and this velocity, the shopping velocity has shifted online. And so there are opportunities there for you too, not just as a 9-to-5 person, but as a freelancer as well. So that is the introduction to this webinar. I hope you got some questions in your mind brewing about, asking yourself. And it really is so important to get into that mind frame, because again, if you're just putting together your resume, putting a little GitHub link in there, attaching your portfolio and shooting it off like this, you may get someone interested. You may have someone call you back. But if you're not, I can tell you it's because you don't have a strategy and you haven't established what you want out of your job. You haven't established what you want as the web developer. And again, it's important not to if you're feeling desperate about getting a job, it's really important not to let that desperation kind of take over, because you'll end up making some really hasty decisions, some decisions you may really regret later on. And again, this is an industry where you don't have to be desperate. So let's move on to the second component of this. What are the components that employers are actually looking for? All right. So here's the other, I'm kind of bored with this Indeed.com thing. Let's go over here to this GitHub, because we'll talk about this in just a second. But where should I start with this? Debunking a myth. Let's debunk this myth that you need to learn 20, 30, 40 technologies. And the more you have on your resume, the more employers are going to love it. Absolutely false. It's what you can do with those tools. It is the problems you can solve with those tools. And that is the most important thing. If you don't get anything out of this webinar, if you get nothing out of it, just this one thing, it's all about the problem solving, baby. Not the tech stack, not oh man, I'm bored with JavaScript, I'm bored with React, I'll go learn GraphQL, and then I'm going to go learn Ruby. I'll show these people, just make this resume real nice looking with all these languages and frameworks and technologies. First of all, there is an endless pit of web technologies you can learn. You could throw yourself in an attic for the next 20 years and you would still be learning them. And you would be in your rocker with a big quilt on, feeling cold and saying, man, just never had time to apply for a job. Learning these technologies is one big hamster wheel. And so here's the minimum. Front end, HTML, CSS, JavaScript framework. Back end language, maybe a back end framework. Full stack, all of that. Oh, and back end plus a database. Full stack, everything I just said. Anything after that is a complete and utter bonus, and you may be better off spending your time doing something else, like working on the skills you already have. Because a page of 50 technologies means nothing to me as an employer. What can you do with them? What problems can you solve? And if you're a junior developer, you need to be devoting more time to actually solving problems with your code rather than just adding them to like this web technology fanny pack. Like, oh, here's another one. Here's, here's static site generators. Boop. Oh, here's Gatsby. Boop. Here's GraphQL. Boop. Here's Sails and Rails and, JavaScript, CrimeaRiver.js, the newest framework of the week. Boop. And it's easy to get into that mode of collecting new technologies. So here's what I'm saying. Your resume should be one page. You don't have to go overboard with all the technologies that you know. It's more important to illustrate your problem-solving process in your projects and in your interview when you're being asked about these projects, when you're talking to your employer. I have an example of a resume here. Now, of course, this isn't the only one example that you can use. This is just one of many examples. Now, someone made a really good point about this, and I'm in the process of revamping this resume because this is in the course, my course, How to Get a Job in Web Development. They made the point that with this colored font, it might not pass through an ATS. If you haven't heard of an ATS, that's an acronym for Applicant Tracking System. They suck. All of them suck. And a lot of companies use them. And there are lots of great developers whose materials are thrown right in the recycle bin. And I've done some testing with a specific ATS, and the results were really grim. I won't go into it, but just filtering out a good applicant because of the ATS, and it wasn't making good decisions. So that could actually be a problem for some people watching this. If you're not getting callbacks, check the language on your resume and see if that language is matching the job description, because some of these applicant tracking systems are so picky. They are ridiculous. And if you don't match the tech stack or something in the resume, they'll throw your resume in the trash, in the digital trash. And it's just like, seriously? They're terrible. So I hope they can improve in the very near future because they're really terrible. But anyways, some of these ATSs might not be able to read the colored font. They only read black or darker font on white. So yeah, I'm going to fix this to more accurately reflect that. But anyways, as you can see here, this is a really simple resume, okay? First name, last name, what they do, contact info, profile. Here's what's important. Your company stands out to me. I design MERN apps. I'm active in the open source community, etc. Relevant experience. Now, this is for a new developer, right? This is for a junior developer, but they have been doing some stuff here that is either directly related to web development or adjacently related. And as a junior, it's okay to write what you're doing in an adjacent field. And when you're writing these bullet points, notice too in the relevant experience area, here, let me make this a little bigger. That didn't work, but here you go. Notice too in the relevant experience area that these bullet points not just list out what Michelle Bell has done, but the impact of what she has done. So whatever job it is that you decide to put on your resume, don't, even if it's something like, current job, burger flipper, if you can track how much money you've saved or how many people you've served or, any kind of process that improved that company's operation, put it in your resume. Because why? Because problem solving. So for example, conversion of a high traffic e-commerce site from PHP backend to Node ecosystem, saving $8,000 in annual maintenance fees. Conversion decreased page load time by 30%. Huge problem solved. And employers want to see this because when you solve problems for them, you're doing one of two things. Sometimes you're doing both. You're either making them money or you're saving them money. And that's every employee's primary job when they're employed at a company. Make money for the company, save money for the company. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter what department you're in. You could be C-suite, you could be primary mop pusher, you could be whatever. You could work in the cafeteria, you could be a web developer, you could be a desktop app developer. Everyone there is making the company money or saving them money. Sometimes they're doing both. And when you articulate this in your application materials, that's when the pupils of employers start to dilate. That's when employers start paying attention. Because again, it's not about this page after page after page after page of tech that you know. It's how you're using your skills, specifically your web developer skills, to solve problems. And when you're solving problems in the context of a business, you're making the company money, you're saving the company money. So that is really important to remember. Again, these materials are meant to grab an employer's eyeballs. Even after the ATS nonsense, even after being filtered through all these computerized programs, the last thing to look over this resume is a human. They might even have it in front of them when they interview you. And so you have to cater to those eyeballs. You have to cater to an employer. And when you show them that you can solve problems, and that's code word for making or saving money, they're going to want you on their team. Assuming you can communicate and do all this other stuff that we're going to talk about. But for the most part, that's going to give you that curb appeal where they're like, yeah, we want to talk to this person. We want to talk to this person. And you don't have to be the best developer in the room. This is another misconception. This is another almost stereotype that you have to be this, just saving the world and ending world hunger, inventor of a new program or something. You develop this killer app. She's the next Steve Jobs. If you are that developer, that is amazing. And you should keep rocking it out and leverage that to the best of your ability. But if you're not, that's okay. Because you only have to be marginally better. Okay? What do I mean by marginally better? I mean one little teeny tiny iota. If you and your clone went in and applied to company R, your clone has everything is the same as you. I mean clone. And the only thing different was that you used an improper piece of grammar. Like, where can I make an example of this? Let's say you didn't include an apostrophe then your clone is marginally better. Let's turn the tables and say you used an apostrophe where you were supposed to, and your clone didn't use an apostrophe where your clone was supposed to. Now you're marginally better. And this is a game of margins. So even the smallest little things, this is what I'm saying, the smallest of things, the most marginal and seemingly inconsequential of things are actually very significant. Why is this? Because we have millions of developers taking the same courses, making the same projects, making the same resumes, and sounding the same in their cover letters, all without work experience. And so these people functionally, in the eyes of the company, are clones. So they're trying to find someone who is just even marginally better than a clone. All right, this is important. This is really important, developers. Just marginally better. So where can you practically apply that? Anywhere where you can just do something a little bit better. And this is something I actually talk about a bit in portfolio surgery. When you're doing your projects, when you're working on your projects, trying to be better, studying your competition. And I actually share a GitHub repo. There is a GitHub repo of junior developer portfolios that you can study. And so you can see, these are real life portfolios. And you can see what they're doing not so good, and you can see what they're doing good, and then you can do better. You don't have to, completely transform everything. You can just do a little bit. But if you want to go that extra mile and do it completely better, right on. But you don't have to. So that concept of being marginally better is very important. And it's very low effort for the most part because you're not, starting an entirely new project from scratch. You're just taking these small things and making them marginally better. So, and again, I want to emphasize, maybe I didn't emphasize this in the first place, but the things we're talking about today, this could really be like an 8-hour webinar where we're talking about this really in depth and like taking your questions and stuff, but there's so much to get through that I can't focus too much on any one thing. So unfortunately, I have to move on, but hopefully you have some ideas working in your brain based on what we just talked about with your resume. Now, the 4 components, I don't know if I mentioned it earlier, but here are the 4 components: your cover letter, resume, GitHub link, and your portfolio. These are 4 components you may just consider putting in your application materials package. Now, the thing I get the most pushback with from some people is a cover letter. Some people say no one reads them. I read them. I'm an employer. I read them, and they're a chance to express yourself and work on those communication skills and grab the attention of your employer. And to be honest, I've never met an employer who said, we just didn't go with them because their cover letter was terrible. Like, I've never heard that. I've heard people say their resume was bad. I've heard people say their portfolio sucked. I've heard people say they didn't have a GitHub account. So, what are they doing? Never heard that. Oh, there's Brave's ad again. I just earned some crypto. Never heard people say, yeah, their cover letter was really terrible. We decided not to go forward. So for me, they have more benefits than not when I'm talking with junior developers. So let's go to this cover letter here. Now this is actually right out of the book, How to Get a Job in Web Development. I'm not going to read everything. Let's see. Yeah, as I opened up here, cover letters are probably the most misunderstood concept in the job application process. Many applicants don't know how to construct them, or worse, don't include them at all. This is good news for you as a developer, because in this chapter, we're going to go over how to build a cover letter that highlights your skills and accomplishments. Now, this is an example of a cover letter. And again, I'm going to be redoing this one because of that person. Shout out to that person who mentioned ATS. This could possibly mess with the ATS, this blue font and this pink font. As an employer, this is a quick rundown of this applicant. So I'm like, okay, where do I need to focus my attention? Boom, daily tech, HTML5, CSS3, JavaScript, jQuery. Currently learning GraphQL, Python, headless Chrome. And then some extra narrative here. Basically what this is just warming up the reader to their resume to their GitHub and to their portfolio. So there's some contact information here. It's all on one page. Who, what, when, where, why, how. Your company looks cool. I also have experience in Adobe XD and CSS and Photoshop. I'm a volunteer EMT. That's a good place to put that on the cover letter too. So it's like, okay, they're an EMT. They're already thinking pro. You can't be a schlub as an EMT. You're proactive. You're saving lives. So that's good. This is something good. Other things you maybe weren't able to include in your resume, you can put on your cover letter. And the other thing too is that if you do these right, they can be great conversation starters at your interview. Because how many people have put, yeah, I've learned MongoDB in their resume. It's not really a conversation starter because, again, everyone applying to a job that requires Mongo is just kind of, well, yes, I have a nose. Like, it's not really something worth talking about because it is so everyday. A volunteer EMT is not an everyday thing, and that's a good conversation starter. Or anything, any like fun fact down here, nothing too ridiculous, but something interesting about you that supports you as a professional. So, if you're a cream corn wrestling champ, you don't want to put that in a cover letter. Like, that's like interesting, like icebreaker at a bar, but not at a job interview. So keep it professional. But I think, from an employer perspective, when written right, when written correctly, and in an engaging way, these can be really powerful. And again, they kind of have like a sustaining value, because if your employer brings something up on your cover letter, it means they were, number one, engaged with you, and number two, want to talk with you more about it. They find it interesting. They're like, that's kind of an interesting little fun fact. So yeah, cover letters, I don't, how many times am I going to sigh in one sentence? I don't know how much to go over cover letters for right now, because we have so much stuff to go over. I just want to let you know that cover letters get a bad rap, and you will hear some employers say, yeah, I don't even read them. But I'm here to counter that and say that I do read them, and so do many other people. And they can be great conversation starters once you get to the interview. The third component is your GitHub account. I'm going to take a little sip here. Shout out to Chiquito. So, in your GitHub account, for those of you new to GitHub, this is a place where you can publish your projects. You don't have to use GitHub. If you don't, it's totally fine. There are other places where you can host your code, and not all projects are meant to be public. However, it is expected in this day and age that people have a GitHub account. So if you don't have one, just go ahead and sign up for one. It's free. And you can also, they're also good to have too, because you can practice Git, which is a version control system. And it's really important for all modern developers. And using Git through the command line to push your projects to GitHub and work with GitHub, it's really a great way of learning and using the Git skill set. So GitHub, and I'm going to bring your attention back. So all these things are kind of interrelated, and I'll show you how. So on this resume down here, we have some links. We have the little linky links, GitHub portfolio links right here. Here's the GitHub. Here's the portfolio. When you're doing your resumes, include those links. You don't want to exclude those two. Also too, in this resume, just to kind of step back for one quick second, don't put references in your first round of application materials. It's a security thing, and if they really want to talk to people in your life, they can ask you in person, or they can ask you on the phone, hey, can you give me the name of this person, or your reference list or client list or whatever? Make sure you ask your reference if it's okay to use their name and phone number, please. Getting a call randomly from a random company asking if Bev McDev is your friend or work for you or whatever is awkward, and you want your reference to know that they might be getting a call. That you don't want to, it's in your best interest because then that reference is going to have the heads up and be mentally prepared to talk to that potential employer. Be like, yeah, I know Bev McDev, and they can kind of put you in a better light compared to if they got a call unexpectedly. So give them the heads up and ask them first. So talking about this GitHub page, this is my GitHub page. I use this is a training account. Earlier on, as an aspiring developer, this was my main account that I included on my resume. And all of my, not all of them, but some of my portfolio projects were included in my GitHub account, as well as my portfolio itself. So some of you may know this, but just an FYI, you can actually host your portfolio if it doesn't have a back end. You can host any static page on GitHub, and they're really handy. GitHub is really handy for portfolios. You can even, I think you can use custom domains. I did not upgrade for that. I did not upgrade and get that option, but here is my portfolio itself. But going back, let's just take it. I'm gonna back up here. I'm all over the place. So we'll talk about the portfolio in just a moment. The thing about GitHub accounts is that they're important to have from an employer perspective because they want to see your code. At the end of the day, you're using code to solve problems. And so to have an insight into your coding process, not just the process, but what kinds of tech are you actually working with? What is the extent of your involvement in some of these projects? Are you involved in open source communities in any way? Have you contributed to other projects? Are you contributing and communicating with other members of the developer community? These are all things an employer can discover just by taking a few minutes to discover and explore your GitHub account. And there's also an option right here. Pinned projects. Your best work should be going on front. Things you want your employer to see. Because this is all about the curb appeal and first impressions. Like, if you can't grab their attention in 7 seconds, you're going to be another person in the heap. And you want to be the one to stand out. So put your best work in the front. Put all your projects in your portfolio on the front. Those, theoretically are your best work anyway. Put those right on the front. Pin them. So there's the other, this is a point of contention. This GitHub, I can't speak. This GitHub contributions box. This GitHub contributions box is such a pain in my butt. This thing is so darn dumb. People put the dumbest amount of weight on this silly little box as if it represents how busy you are as a developer, which is patently false. They seem to come to this conclusion that, the more dots you have filled, the better developer you are, the busier you are. That doesn't mean anything. If anything, it means you're inefficient. If there's 1,000 contributions in here, to me, that could mean a person's inefficient. And it's so silly anyways, because there are programs out there, little apps that'll go in and backdate your GitHub contributions box. So you can fill them up in any way you want. You could put 25,000 contributions on here just with a little Python script. It's so silly. That all said, if you have a GitHub contributions box that has all gray dots, you got to do something about that because, again, I think it's ridiculous, but other employers don't. And people who may not know a lot about what this actually means are putting a lot of weight on it. And so sometimes you're just like, okay, I don't have any projects to contribute. I don't have any code to throw in there. What can I do? Just go into one of these projects and write up a little README, or clean up the grammar, or write a little sentence, or I don't know, capitalize something, give someone a shout out in a repo if they're sponsoring you. Just these little things that will paint this GitHub box in a better light. These things, again, you can manipulate them in any which way. I'm sure if you spent just a few minutes on GitHub, you could find the script for it. There are many, but one way or the other, just make sure that the first impression of your employer isn't, oh, they're not doing much in this contributions box, are they? You want to put yourself in the best light possible. So take care of this. Other things, let's see, pinned repos. These are the most important things because this is where your employer is first landing. Please also too, I've seen this in a few GitHub repos, don't put any not safe for work stuff. Don't put anything offensive. Don't put any, trying to be, I get it. People are trying to be funny. I like being funny too, but in a professional environment, you got to tone it down a little bit. Sometimes a lot of it, depending on who's looking at it and where you're applying. So no not safe for work stuff, no edgy stuff. This is not a good place to be an edgy meme lord. You can do that in a Discord room. Not on the front page of your GitHub and not in any of your other application materials or in your projects. So this is a core component of those four things that should be a part of your application materials when you're trying to land your first developer job. Now, let's talk about the big thing. I'm saving the biggest one for last of these four components, your portfolio. Let's check it out. So again, this is my first portfolio. I did a critique. I actually self-critiqued this portfolio a few weeks ago on my channel. And to be totally honest, this portfolio needs some work. Going over it, it is far from perfect. I haven't maintained it, so of course things are broken. But I mean, I'm talking about if the code worked on some of these projects, I'm talking about the UX UI. I'm talking about the lack of proper contact form. I'm talking about the actual projects. Some of these projects I put in here are just, they're a little below standard. One in particular is below standard. Paradoodly-doo, could you please, or Sarah, if either of you can find that video where I'm critiquing this portfolio, I think some people might benefit from taking a peek at it, because I don't want to go over it again. It was like a 20-minute video, 15-minute video. Don't want to waste time with this one, but you can check that out at your leisure and just see some of the stuff I had some issues with going over it and critiquing it. And if someone had submitted this portfolio to me in 2020, some issues I may have had with it as an employer. So going over this portfolio though, let's talk about the things, but this is it though. Listen to this though. It's not all doom and gloom. It's not all doom and gloom because even though I have some issues with it, I still use this thing to get my first dev job. I submitted this portfolio and I got callbacks. I got interviews all across the United States. I got interviews with companies in Silicon Valley. I talked with frickin' a tech lead at Netflix with this portfolio. So, you know, it doesn't have to be perfect, but again, you want to be marginally better. So try your hardest and don't sweat it. If it's imperfect, but you do want to be taking into consideration that you're competing against a lot of people. So it's savage. It's a savage process because at the same time you're trying to court these employers, you're also trying to push off your competition. And sometimes there's thousands, plural, of developers applying for these same positions. So you're having to play offense, defense, up fence, and down fence, trying to get all these people off of you, away from you. You're trying to get to the top of the stack, and you're trying to impress an employer. It's hard work. Let's check out this portfolio. Long story short, you want to be including a portfolio link with every resume you send. Okay? No portfolio, no callback. This is why. Senior developers and mid-level developers, i.e. developers with experience, they don't need to show an employer in a portfolio because what do they have? What's the thing they have that substitutes the need for a portfolio? Work experience. The one line on their resume makes up for an entire portfolio. This line right here, if this was an employer, this line right here would make up for this entire portfolio. That's why it's really challenging for juniors because junior developers, they don't have that work history. And you have to make up for it somehow. So you have to somehow else illustrate your talents. So, you know, for a mid-level developer, yeah, I worked at the .NET shop down the street for a couple years. Yeah, I worked on a few projects. That holds a lot of weight. So in order to make up for that, you have to illustrate it in another way, and you do that through your projects. So in this portfolio, I have a handful of projects here. Get Dev Spotlight, Get Her Done, Bethy'sBackyard.com, BarnCatDigital.com, RealToughCandy.com, blah, blah, blah. Also a contact area. So there's a few things you absolutely want to include in this portfolio. Again, I wrote an entire book on it about making projects pop. So if you want more information on that, check out Portfolio Surgery. Again, it is a book right here, and it is a course right here. I show you 5 methods for making projects your own and standing out in front of the crowd. And I know, especially because so many people are taking stuff like the Cold Steel Bootcamp, which is an amazing course. I mean, for 15 bucks or whatever, holy crap. But there's a lot of Yelp camps floating around there. There's a lot of photo galleries floating around there. And again, you're competing against thousands of other people competing for these same jobs. You have to stand out in a positive way. And one really good way of doing that is through your projects. And what do projects do? Well, they illustrate what kind of problems you solve. So let me go right ahead here. Let's talk about the components you want to put in your project. Number 1, you want to brand yourself. So here's my attempt at doing that right here. Selected Works by RealToughCandy. If not right away, soon enough they're going to find out this is a portfolio courtesy of RTC. Number 2, you want a contact form. Now, in the critique, I had mentioned I don't have a frickin' contact form here because this was a static site built in Ruby, and I didn't know how to work with it at the time. I didn't know how to embed a contact form at the time, and so I had a workaround, and that really, to this day, I'm just like, oh man, you're still killing me. You want a contact form with a contact page with a contact form. It doesn't necessarily have to be a page. I guess I should just say area. You want a contact area. Make it as easy as possible for your employer to contact you. Do not make them think. If they have to poke around, go through a modal or something, or go through all these checks just to get to you, it's going to be really obnoxious. And you want to paint yourself in the best possible light possible. So let's go here. We're going to go into one of these projects. We'll go into the Dev Spotlight. This is one of my very first projects I built. It was a photo gallery of aspiring developers. These are all real people. These are all my old school subscribers and people I met when I first started the channel. And I said, you know what? These people are really neat. I'm going to interview them, and I'm going to give them their own page. Each person on this site gets their own page, and I'm going to talk about them, and I'm going to interview them. So I interviewed all of these people: Dr. Kamea, Michael Korenblum, Elise, Mirza, Casadero, and Jim. And I put them on the Dev Spotlight. So this is what an employer, this has been unaltered. This resume and this project has been, they've been unaltered since I applied as a junior developer to all these jobs. So as you see here, I have some font, I have some typing. What the heck? Where's the link to the project? This is where you get to have the upper hand here, because this is something a lot of developers don't do. What I see a lot of times in portfolios is a picture to the project, a little thumbnail of a project, and the name of it. And then I'm expected as an employer to just click on it and be impressed. You need to show me why I should be impressed. You need to tell me what the problem was and how you solved it. And not only that, what was the impact? You know why you need to do that? Because if you can explain your problem-solving process and you understand the value of your process, I'm going to want you to apply that process to my company to save me money and to make me money. Here's an interesting, have any of you guys heard of the 10X? It was a 10X factor, 10X something, 10Xing, that's the context I've heard it in the most. 10Xing someone, when you're 10Xing an employee, is you hire them and then you expect a 10X return. And what I mean by that is, if an employer hires you, let's say they hire you for $50,000 a year. Nice salary here in the Midwest United States for an entry-level job. If they're paying you $50,000 a year, they expect to make 10 times that. They expect you to generate $500,000 a year, or save it. Some combination of that. If you can make them and save them, doesn't matter the breakdown, it has to be $500,000. if you're getting paid 50,000, that's a 10x. If a software engineer is getting paid 150,000, that would be 1.5 million. So the 10x factor, they're investing in you because they expect a return on that investment. And so you have to illustrate why you'd be a good fit for that. You have to illustrate that you can 10x it. Now, not every employer is 10xing. Some are trying to double you at least, but they're not there to break even on you. They're not there to break even on you. And if you cannot emphatically show that you can make this company money, it's probably on to the next candidate. So one of the strongest things you can do in your projects is not just putting a title and thumbnail, because that's not showing me how I'm going to 10x an employee or even double my money or even break even. That's not showing me anything. If anything, it's showing me I'm going to lose money on this investment because I don't know anything about this person or their ability. And I'm not in the business to invest in something that's going to lose me money. So you have to explain your process. What I did here is called the PAR method. I talk about it in Portfolio Surgery, and I really talk about it in How to Get a Job in Web Development. The PAR method, P-A-R, it stands for problem, action, and result. Now, instead of defining it with problem, action, and result, I used challenge, solution, and outcome. And this entire thing I did for every one of my projects. Was it RealToughCandy.com? I did it. Yes. Was it YouTube? Yes. Was it Bethy's? Yes. Was it Barncat? Yes. Was it Get Her Done? Yes. All of these projects had the PAR method. And so it was one extra way of showing an employer, number one, I understand my problem-solving process. Number two, I can articulate the impact of my problem-solving process. And number three, I can illustrate that I'm able to repeatedly, consistently apply this process, even when I'm at that business. And so I was getting callbacks. I was getting interviews. I was getting job offers. Some companies I've never heard of. Some companies you've heard of. Some companies everyone's heard of. And again, this portfolio is far from perfect, and it's not the only thing that got me these callbacks, interviews, and job offers, but it really helped. So let's go into this dev spotlight. We'll go to the actual project here. And then at the end of the narrative, I have the link to the project. So in your portfolio, you always want to have links to projects, because what a portfolio is just it's just a collection of your best work. Your best foot goes forward with these things. So this has not been updated again in a couple years, so some of this stuff may break, but I have a built-in terminal right on this page. So my choices are Casadero, Michael, Mirza, Elise, Kamea, or Jim. Let's see. What about Kamea? Kamea. And this was his page where I interviewed him about his experiences as a web developer and what he was up to. And he's also a music producer. He was doing some cool stuff. Whatever happened to you, Dr. Kamea? Where have you been? He has his own dentistry practice or dental practice. I don't know if he still does that, but he was doing some crazy stuff a few years ago, and he was into crypto. I know he was doing some crypto stuff. I hope you're doing well, Dr. Kamea, wherever you are. But this was that project, and this is what I saw as a real problem. Because I hear some of these institutions say, we have a tech shortage. It's like, okay, I know 6 people right in front of me who want to work in tech. They're very talented. Here they are. Miss me. So I built this dev spotlight to highlight up-and-coming developers who are living working proof that this is a false narrative. Now, whether people agree with me or not, that's not the point. The point is, I found a problem, and here's what I did to fix it, or solve it, or attempt to solve it. Is this site? I mean, let's be honest. Is this site something that has completely upturned the narrative? There's a tech shortage. No. The point is, it was my attempt at solving a problem. I understood it. I developed a system, and I'm not a system, but I developed a solution to it. And here's my outcome. The Dev Spotlight series is an avant-garde take on design with progressive enhancement for maximum user experience. The developers now have a home that is hip, interactive, and 100% responsive. Again, that's a project that is not necessarily solving world hunger, but for me, it's a real problem. And so that was a project I worked on to try and help solve that problem. And when you work on your own projects, you need to be thinking about that too. Not just, okay, let's fire up one of my awesome code editors down here. Let me rip open Visual Studio Code. I'm going to make a dating app for all you lonelies. You know, maybe that is a problem, but how is it any different than what we have already? And what's the benefit? What's the outcome? I mean, again, you don't have to solve these really, really, really big problems, but you also need to be a little unique with it when you are working on your projects, because the problem you're going to run into is that the same a million developers are also working on the projects that you are. So you have to give them a twist. You have to do something to it to make it your own. And then that makes it so much easier to talk about at an interview as well when you get into these conversations. And that's the next thing we're going to talk about, this third big chunk of today's webinar. Hope you guys are doing all right out there, by the way. If you are just joining us, we are talking about getting your first job in web development in 2021. It's tough. It's an uphill battle, no doubt. Always has been, always will be. But if you just keep going at it and keep working at it, you're going to be just fine. The worst thing you can do is quit and not come back. So don't do that. Keep working at it. Keep fighting for it. And you're going to make it. You're going to do it, no doubt. But you have to, again, as we were talking about earlier, you have to have the right mindset, a mindset that works for you. There's no such thing as like the one and only mindset. Like, you have to have a mindset that works for you, that takes into account what you want out of life. And then that mindset is going to help fuel your strategy, and your strategy is going to help fuel your mindset. So they're really intertwined in that way. And once you develop that strategy, then you're going to know what kind of places you want to apply to, whether you want to go all out and work in Des Moines or, Portland, Maine, or wherever, Tampa, Florida, Austin, Texas, El Paso, Las Cruces, New Mexico. I mean, insert city here and even around the world. Once you get that going, things start falling into place. Things start falling into place a lot easier. And also, what's nice about having a strategy is that you don't have to think about every little thing and assess every little thing, because now you have this framework in your mind for, like, okay, I've determined that I won't take a job in Wisconsin. I don't know. We have some Wisconsin haters here. I don't know. But let's say you just absolutely cannot do Wisconsin. Then, once you see the W word, you can just go on to the next thing. It's totally non-cerebral. So setting up those filters and setting up those firewall rules of your mind can be very helpful and help you more efficiently get a dev job, land a dev job, and go to these interviews and get these callbacks and go and talk about what you're capable of doing with these employers. So let's talk about this now that we're on the topic, the interview stage. So there's a lot to talk about with this. Again, we could probably go another 7 or 8 hours talking about interviews, but I'm going to tell you the most important things, and that's kind of the theme of this entire webinar. There's Brave again, my push notification, earning some basic attention token during the live stream. Like I said, we're talking about the big things. You want to tackle those first, and then you can worry about the small stuff. Worry about the nuance. But the interview stage is really important, because this is where things start getting real. It's not just you behind the keyboard making these cool projects, talking about what you're doing, what problems you're solving, what value you can add to the company. Okay, you think you can add value to this company? We're going to put you in the hot seat. Come on down. You're the next contestant on Hire a Junior. Let's hear what you got. a lot of things are going on during the interview. Now, sometimes you may have a pre-screen, a phone screen, just to make sure you're not, somebody you're not, or claiming you're someone. You say, yes, I'm Janet Smith, and you turn out to be like Jeremy Scott or something. Yeah, they're just trying to make sure like you're the developer they say you are. They may give you a few questions. I've had a few phone screens before, and I have to say all of them, 100% of them, were really awkward. And I think it was just because they were just trying to determine I was the person I said I was. Now, on my GitHub, or on my portfolio, I also have my YouTube channel, which helped a lot because people can go right to my channel, or they could go right to my channel and say, that's okay. It sounds like this person, RealToughCandy, cool. But I've had I was interviewing once, it was on a phone screen with this tech education company. They're asking me these trivia questions about Node. It was just weird. Like, the questions were so basic, and it was like, yeah. So the ad wanted a person with like 3 years or 4 years Node experience. I applied anyway, and that's another thing. Just side note, on these job descriptions, these are wish lists. So they're going to be Casey's General Store. Developers, has anyone here ever been to Casey's? It's a gas station, but their pizza is freaking awesome. Just saying, just a side note. So they're saying, we want a bachelor's, we want 3 or more years experience. Listen, if you know Microsoft SQL Server, you're familiar with it, and this seems like a cool job, just go ahead and apply. This is a wish list. A lot of people writing these things have no idea what they're saying. I've seen some ridiculous requirements on this thing. Just apply anyway. The worst that's going to happen is that you don't get a callback. So, yeah, that's what I have to say about that. So anyways, going back to it. Interviews. I've had phone screens with silly questions. Whatever the combination is, once you get in that hot seat when you're at the interview, this could be through Zoom, it could be in person, however the configuration, they're looking for a few different things. Number one, they want to make sure you are who you say you are. If you say you're a MERN stack developer and that interviewer starts talking about MERN, you better know what that acronym stands for. You need to know, you need to speak the lingo. So they're kind of filtering that way. They're also checking for your communication skills. Now, some companies do these things called whiteboard interviews. Fortunately, outside Silicon Valley, outside startup culture, especially with junior positions, whiteboards you don't have to worry about. If you really are not in the mood, and if you really want to know for sure, just call up the company and ask them. Ask to speak to someone in the development department or human resources or whoever does the interviews. Ask them, hey, I saw the job opening, had a quick question. Do you guys do whiteboard interviews? And if they say yes and you're not in the mood, it's on to the next candidate, or on to the next, they're on to the next candidate, but you're on to the next job. Most companies outside of Silicon Valley, outside of startups, they're not doing whiteboard interviews for new developers. They're just not. And more people are realizing how ridiculous most of them are. Data structures and algorithms are important. You will be using them in your career, but to spend 5 or 6 months studying this stuff if you're not going for a FANG job is a real waste of time, in my opinion. You could be busy. You could be spending that time working on your tech skills, your tech stack, solving problems, building projects, and working on your communication skills. And that's really one of the biggest things they're looking for in an interview, is that when you sit down, so there's a lot to take in when you sit down at an interview. It's nerve-wracking, right? It's so unnatural. You're basically spilling your life story as a developer, the important highlights anyway, to a bunch of strangers you don't know. Now, the job that I took in enterprise, my first web development job, was an enterprise position. It was a senior role. I was interviewed by 4 people all at one time, like on this big desk. It was the company owner, senior dev, and 2 other developers. And outside of web, they did IBM stuff. IBM proprietary language development. And it was nerve-wracking. Of course it was. They're taking note of everything, though. Like, what are you wearing? How are you communicating? What's your body language? And we could talk about each of these components, but the most important thing is that when you are asked a question or a topic comes up, how are you communicating? How are you engaging? Because when you're engaging with that senior developer in that interview, there's a good chance that's how you're going to be engaging with that person on the job. And so that person's taking notes. And if you just clam up or act defensive, or, I was watching this thing earlier, this free code camp, they were doing a thing on Jobs Today too. This person, I can't remember what her name was, but she was saying she was in this interview, and she was interviewing this candidate on a whiteboard, and I think she works at Netlify. And she was interviewing this candidate. The candidate started crying, and so she felt bad. She's like, I understand, like, these interviews are really hectic. Well, the person who was crying got really defensive. And so they passed on that person, because it's all about the first impression. And if you get a bad one, they're not going to call you back in. Sometimes if you make an okay impression, and especially if there's more than one person at that interview, you're going to have some varying results and varying impressions of people. They'll say, yeah, I got an okay impression. Let's bring them back in. You might come in for another interview, but if you really turn them off, if you really do something that's rude or just not friendly, you're not going to get that call back. You're not going to get that. You're not going to get that job offer. They don't want to interview you again. And again, it's because there are so many people applying to these jobs, especially because this person works at Netlify, which is a really popular company too. A lot of people want to work there. So, they don't have time for that. They don't have time to entertain people who are emotionally immature, not very good communicators. Also too, not to take away from what we're talking about, but because this is a problem with some developers, professional communication is a technical skill. I don't care if people call it a soft skill. It's not. It's technical in a lot of circumstances. So I have this course, Professional Communication for Junior Developers, where we have these scenarios. One of them is when I'm in an interview and I just completely drop the ball. And so we go through and we analyze some of these scenarios junior developers encounter. And at an interview, it's a one-time thing. So when you get to that interview, number one, before you go to that interview, you want to prepare. You want to prepare in whatever way possible. If you're not a good communicator and you know it, you got to talk to someone. You have to talk to someone. I don't mean therapy. I mean, have a technical conversation with someone. In Discords, there's voice chat. You could start by having some conversations with peer developers. If that is something that's not an option, call a friend, just something. Ask them to send them a script and be like, hey, ask me these questions, or ask me about this, ask me about that, and just get used to the act of engaging with someone and speaking with someone. Because as developers, a lot of our time is spent behind a computer and we're not really talking with people. But the truth is, when you're in a 9-to-5 situation, when you're actually getting paid for your developer work, most of what you do is a form of communication. And so that's the big thing they're looking for. How does this person interact with the team? How does this person interact with higher ups? How does this person respond to a stranger asking them about their work? And if you're not able to articulate some of the stuff in your portfolio, that's going to be a problem. So the best way to overcome that, again, I know, especially if communication is just not your thing, you're just like, I don't like talking. I totally get it. But once you're in the 9-to-5, once you're in enterprise or any place where you're making money as a developer, you're going to be working with people. Real development work is not done in a bubble by yourself. It's done with a team. You're talking to people throughout the day. You're typing with people, DMing them, putting comments in your code. That's a form of communication too. So really being proactive with your communication. And honestly, if this is what's so nice about having your own projects, when you build your own project and you start solving these problems, is that you know your project from top to bottom. Right now, it's been so long since I've engaged in this project. If someone asks me about it, I'd be like, give me 5 minutes. I'll go look at the code and I'll go look at what I was, my mindset. But if I had built this last week, you better believe I could talk 2 or 3 hours about it, because when I was building it, I was really excited. I was self-motivated about building this. This was not a project I found on a course. This was something that came from inside that I wanted to bring alive. And so it's easy for me to talk about stuff like that. And when you build projects or even add features to some projects on these courses that are your own, it becomes so much easier. Because why? Why is that? Because you understand your problem solving process better than anybody. When you take someone else's project, you don't know their mindset, and you don't know really why they're making these decisions. When was the last time somebody in an online course, and I'm an instructor too, so I'm not throwing stones, but a lot of courses, they never explain why they're using these languages and these tech tools in the first place. Like, okay, wait, so why are you using Node? Why are you using GraphQL? And if someone asks you that in an interview, okay, Lisa, I really like this project. Can you tell me a little bit more why you decided to use React? And if you can't answer that, if you have a hard time answering that, it's on to the next candidate. So it's really important to know your projects inside and out. And it becomes a lot easier when you build them yourself, because you're the architect. And it's not like you're having to decipher through someone else's blueprints. You blueprinted it. You designed it. You have your reasons behind it. Whereas with an instructor, they show you what to do. And it feels awesome when you build these projects and be like, hey, check out this Yelp Camp thing. It looks really cool. It works. Look at the functionality. But if you're asked about it in an interview, assuming the employer has never seen Yelp Camp before, let's just assume it's the only one in the world, and you're asked about it, what would you be able to say about it when asked about why did you use MongoDB? Or tell me a little bit more about the front end. Why did you decide to go with, he doesn't use React, but why did you decide to use such and such? Why did you decide to use Flexbox instead of the grid? Or tell me more about what you like about Flexbox. And you need to be ready to answer those questions. So when in the interview, it's going to be a lot easier when you know your projects and when you know your work. Know your work. Know your work. Know your worth. And everything else at that interview is going to fall into place. So yeah, that's pretty much the biggest thing with the interviews is your communication process and knowing your projects. Because they can't ask about former, tell us about your time you spent at Google. You're a new developer. So your sphere is more limited than people who have been in the business for a few years and worked with these other companies. And the line of questioning and the prodding is going to be a little different. The themes are going to be a little more different talking with juniors. So I'm really parched. I'm going to take a drink here. I hope today has been helpful so far talking about these things. I know we talked about a lot to take in. I'm going to go over to the questions in just a few seconds. If anyone has any particular questions, I'll try and get to them. I want to see who all's here actually, because haven't checked in since we started this live stream. But I hope you're doing well out there. If you've enjoyed this live stream so far, please hit the thumbs up button. Show some love for RTC. And yeah. Again, if you want to know more about the portfolio side of things, Portfolio Surgery is now on Amazon. Paradoodly-doo, please pop that link. The new book just dropped this week. It's also a video course on RealToughCandy.io. I show you 5 methods for totally revamping your portfolio, totally unrecognizable projects that you may have built in a course. By the end of the course, no one will be able to recognize them. You're going to have a sense of ownership with these projects, and you're going to understand your process a lot better. Again, it's a book and a course. Also, how to get a job in web development. Most everything we talked about today is in this course. It's also a book on Amazon. Paradoodly-doo. Show some love to the audience and show them where they can get those things. This used to be on Udemy, and it was one of the few courses that had back-to-back 5-star reviews. I have the screenshot somewhere. It was incredible. I couldn't believe it. One person left a 1-star review. I apologized and told them to take more of the course, because as a course creator, I could see how much they had taken. It was like 2%. I'm like, take a few more minutes of the course. They revised their rating to 5 stars afterward. So this course has helped hundreds of people get a job in web development. If this today was if what we talked about today resonated with you and you'd like to learn more about it, I go into it a lot more in how to get a job in web development. All right, so let's check out the comments. Hey, okay. Mods doing their job. Thank you, everyone. Jacques, what's up? Reg Pro Right, Rebecca Earling, hello. Let's see. Michael Peer, what's up? Mr. Zed, what's going on? Hey, Candace is here. Hey, Candace. Thanks for tuning in. Zaya Main, FB, Warren Moore. Warren Moore has an interesting comment. I thought whiteboard interviews were everywhere. Part of the reason I've been afraid to apply. You know, with all the recommendations on YouTube, with all these things we see and hear about on these different, you know, dev-centric sites or whatever, is like pass your, and all these products, you know, we have stuff like Algo Expert, we have the Grokking the Coding interview course, Uneducative. These are some really good products for passing that whiteboard interview. And the thing is, here's what's up. FANGs do the whiteboards. The Silicon Valley companies do the whiteboards because it's a filtering tool. It's a candidate filtering tool. Netlify, as I heard about earlier on the Free Code Camp video, Netlify does whiteboards. A lot of these startups do. But for your typical company outside of Silicon Valley, you normally don't see it. When you do, they always seem to be really unimpressive. The person administering them a lot of times, this is just anecdotally, really unprepared. Or they'll have like, Sarah the Dev was telling me this story. This was not in the Midwest, but somewhere else, that this person had the Cracking the Coding interview. This is just encyclopedic book with the most inane questions. Show me how to rotate a 2D matrix 90 degrees counterclockwise in code. Like, somebody just take me out of my misery with this. So Sarah the Dev was saying this person would just like open up, had a copy of the book on their desk. And what some people do is just open it up and be like, okay, yes, problem number 16.2. Can you please illustrate on the board how to rotate a darn it, Betty, she scratched it out again. Is that a 2D matrix counterclockwise? Really awkward. But so, for the most part, junior developers, web developers, again, not something that you normally have to worry about. But the reason we hear about it a lot is because, number one, they're really difficult. You have to study months for them. There are sites and courses and training materials dedicated just for passing the whiteboard. And the reason they're so popular is because everyone wants to work at a FANG. Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, Google, Microsoft, GitHub, etc. Everyone wants to work there. And so these materials sell like hotcakes because preparing for whiteboard interviews is not something you can just do in one night. You have to spend months doing it. And the questions are really intense. So, yeah. And so it's all part of the system. I would not be hesitant to apply as a junior to any job that, you know, is outside of Silicon Valley. I mean, if you want to work in Silicon Valley, that's absolutely your prerogative. Like, go do it, go rock it out. But again, it's a totally different beast. And you can look up the stats. You don't have to take my word for it. Most IT jobs, and software and web development falls under the IT umbrella. Most IT jobs, the vast majority, it's like 70 or 80% or something, are outside Silicon Valley. So statistically, the majority of us will be working outside of that area. And so therefore, the majority of us do not have to worry about whiteboard interviews, being grilled in a whiteboard interview in Silicon Valley. Yeah, and I remember a few years ago, too, I was watching this Google whiteboard interview, and it has a few million views, and it's still up there. It's this guy and this gal theoretically going through this interview because they're both employees. And the first 30 seconds, I'm just like, Are you serious? Like, I'm never going to be able to work in this industry. Those whiteboard interviews have nothing to do with, your day-to-day job. And honestly, if I could just add a little bit of editorial here, unless I'm going to be rotating 2D matrices or 2D matrices 90 degrees counterclockwise on a daily basis, don't freaking ask me that question in an interview. Let's see. Thanks, Paradoodly-Doo, for dropping those links. Jacques says, this was very awesome. I'm glad I got to spend time with you and converse. I appreciate your time. Yeah. Talking to Paradoodly, my bad. Exploration AT, what's up? Mariam Alasi. Sorry, I mispronounced your name. Liz Set, CS Projects. How React do we need to know to start applying for jobs? CS Projects, how much React do you need to know? So this is a really good question. It's a hard question to answer. And this is why. And it's a really tempting one to answer. Just, you should study 6 months and then you're good to go. That's not true. It all depends on the employer and what type of work you will be doing with React. All the basics you need to have down for any job that is going to incorporate React. But as far as like the more intermediate to advanced things, that varies from job to job. I would say try and build do build a couple projects with it. Start and try as much as possible to build your own project rather than a complete code along. Because what happens is you code along and then you get to the job and you're like, where's the tutorial for this? It's important to use these technologies like React as a means for solving a problem, because that way you can understand the technology better and use it more efficiently. So try to build a project on your own using React and then get to the point where it's like, okay, I think I'm going to use this. I'm going to use this hook, or I'm going to use, whatever frame. That's what's really funny to me. I think React has its own framework now. Is that correct? I don't work with React very much. Even though I learned it as part of the MERN stack and build myself as a MERN developer, React is crazy. It's really cool, but there's a lot going on with it, and it's just its own. It's like the new JavaScript or something. Technically, but you know what I mean. The hype around it and the community around it is really awesome too. We are really spoiled in web development in that way, especially with JavaScript, the JavaScript community, the Vanilla.js community, the React community, and the Vue community. Holy smokes. Really some really robust communities out there in web development. So that's another thing if I could just talk about really quick is, whether you're just starting out learning HTML, whether you've been doing it for 6 months or you're at the year mark learning web development, start getting involved in the community. This is going to help you for a few reasons. Strategy, going back to that thing, the mindset, the strategy, putting yourself in situations where people are talking about tech. They're talking about React. They're talking about JavaScript. They're talking about PHP and Node or whatever technologies you're learning. And you can observe how people interact with each other at these meetings. I'm talking about meetups, virtually. Lots of stuff has gone virtual. These are still really great opportunities because what happens is usually at these meetups, they'll have like a featured speaker. And then afterwards, in a lot of times, not always, but afterwards in a lot of these even, virtual meetups for code like JavaScript, they'll separate you into smaller groups and you'll get to know each other that way. And start talking to people. And again, it can be, I would much rather go to an in-person event like that than a virtual one. For me, it just seems kind of cringy. So your results may vary, but when I was doing them in person, I started going to meetups before I even knew how to code. I was going to JavaScript meetups, and they were awesome. They're free. There's free food, free drinks, featured speaker, and then afterwards you can talk to people. You can, exchange business cards and get your network built up. That's really important. A lot of jobs floating around, a lot of employers floating around at these places too. Just saying. They're really great places to network and find people. That's where the party faithful is. So people who are really excited about what we're doing in web development, people who have worked a full day of work and are still hyped up to go learn more about it. Like, you want those people in your network. the strategy, and always be working on that strategy to get yourself in the industry. Meetups are a freaking amazing way to do that, and most of them are free. All right, developers, I am going to log off. I want to thank you so much for tuning in. I hope this webinar was helpful. We talked about a lot. We talked about mindset. We talked about your job search strategy, where you want to be. What do you actually want? What do you want out of life? What do you want on your web development career? We talked about those 4 components: cover letter, resume, GitHub, and portfolio. We also talked a little bit about interviewing and some of the important components with that, and what's going on the radars and antennae of various employers. So we're going to be coming back with another live stream next week. And if you want to continue the conversation, we have an amazing Discord group. Come check it out. One of the mods will be sharing it here. They're wonderful mods, Paradoodly Do. And Sarah rocking it today. Thank you so much for holding it down in the live chat. And they are both our great mods on our Discord community too. Lots of fun rooms there, fun channels, and some great tech talk. Thanks for tuning in. Happy Friday. Holy crap, this week went by fast. I hope you're having a great weekend. I will see you in a couple days. Peace out, and I hope you have a great weekend. I already said that, but I'm feeling awkward, so why not say it twice? See you later.